That is a firm message to everybody else, I would suggest. It also means that the number 7 car is going to have to start from the pit lane at the end of the starting group to the race with an additional 3-minute time penalty, so effectively a stop and go in the race for car 7. So penalty very, very large, but I suppose you could say, well, the breach of the regulations was very, very large, and therefore the penalty echoes that. So that's dealt with that. The number 7's, that car's not going to be run with an extra driver, so they will be happy at car collection to run with Milan Doncha, Patrick Niederhauser and Mike David Altman, and they will run without the bronze Miro Konopka. Also Robin Freins in the number 3 car. It's been discovered that he's got flu-like symptoms, although a COVID-19 test has come back negative, and they're not sure, the team, whether they can or will replace him. So Robin Freins in the number 3 car, that car he shares with Mirko Bortolotti, Chris Haaser and Marcus Winkelhock, could be a 3-driver lineup as well if Robin Freins is not fit to race. So quite a bit breaking overnight. As I said, still trying to drill down into any information we can get regarding the number 2 car, because it would be horrible not to have Hubert Hauge, Guillermo Berman, Nico Bastian and Philip Ellis in the race, but they'll need a car in order to do so. The other thing I'm noting is that the rain that affected night practice last night is back, Peter Snowden.
It most certainly is, and it was a little bit, wasn't it, Lars? Enough to cause some issues, but we couldn't decide, could we, last night, whether it was sort of around about the complex, the pit complex, if you like, of the GP circuit, whether it was going from there and across onto the Nordschleife or the other way. And I think we concluded that it was definitely coming from the Nordschleife across at the end, at the beginning of the lap, as it were, onto the GP circuit. Very, very different today. There's spray coming up from the cars everywhere, so that's going to be great at night, isn't it? Spray and dark, so we're not going to see anything.
No.
To be able to pass on to you listeners, but lots and lots of spray this morning. It is going to, looking at the weather forecast, it is going to decrease in its precipitation by around about 2-3 o'clock this afternoon, to be good for our other session later on today, which is 4ish, I think. 4 o'clock? 4:40. It's 4:40, I think.
Yeah, local time. It's a bit later than that, actually, but yes, we will be on air at 4:40 UK time, so 5:40 with a build-up with qualifying, top qualifying, a little bit later on than that. I've got an official forecast, actually, because the Nürburgring issues it from the various meteorological groups, and on Friday it'll be much cooler than yesterday because the wind's changed. It's coming from Greenland, so flowing in from the Nordics, and therefore Saturday there's going to be a flush of cold air which will reach northwest Germany, and on Sunday unstable with much cooler weather, with the chance of certainly some rain tonight. Tomorrow being the 26th, rain and a high temperature of 8 degrees. That's all we're going to get to. And then on Sunday, potential for slightly higher temperature, but still the rain's not going to go away. The chance of showers really all day. So you can look at this hour-long session and think, is it worth getting involved with the is it worth getting involved in this particular session? And you have to say, well, probably yes, because these are the conditions they're going to encounter in the race, and it's going to be better to draw at least a little bit of data out of this, but without throwing the car off, and it's very easy to do that.
We went through this yesterday, didn't we, of the dichotomy all the time of what do you do? Team managers, the people who are not driving the cars want all the information, because it's that database, it's that knowledge base that they can draw upon. Should it suddenly happen at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, suddenly it downpours,
yeah.
Right, what do we do? It's not just settings, it's what do we do, strategies, what do we do, what map, what mode, etc, etc. There's so much more to it than just, put on a set of wet tyres. Clearly, there's a lot more to it than that. However, the flip side of that, as you said, Johnny, is to get a result in the race, you need the car to cross the line, which means you need it in one piece. Sounds really, really obvious. It's the Nordschleife. It's totally different to anything else. It is known, as you said at the top of the show, the Green Hell. There's a reason it got that name. And we had in a whole day's racing there, not a 4-hour VLN/NLS race as they are now. Still VLN organised, so I think we're allowed to say VLN a little bit. They do organise it still.
On your head be it.
Yeah, well, exactly. But you've got wet, you've got night time, and we've got 24 hours. and 23 classes of cars out there. So speed differentials, phenomenal. And we've seen a couple of things. I just saw the number 33 Falcon Motorsport Porsche out on the pan, about to go onto the pits, out of the pits onto the track. So that one's out. I hope for a minute it was the 44 Dumbrett car, just to see that had recovered from last night. No sign of that yet. We will keep an eye out for that for you if it reappears. But horrible conditions out there on track at the moment, and literally, one thing I would say is it's better than last night in the sense that it's properly, fully wet. And that's one thing that drivers and teams can deal with, because they know what they've got. It's 100% a condition. That bit in between, which can happen where that bit, you often hear drivers referring to the phrase greasy. Yeah. Because you're never sure, is it not, is it not? And that can happen somewhere, particularly like here. It's bad enough at Spa, that's got its own microclimate. That's only 60 k's away. We're right in the Eifel Mountains now, 100 and something corners. We're not going to go through that because Paul Troswell said there's a number, and we've got to guess it right by the end of the show at the weekend. Apparently he's counted it, but I think there's a prize for that, apparently.
Knowing Paul, I don't think there will be at all.
Well, no, somebody else will fund it, obviously. Joe Bradley's buying it, that's what it is. There you go.
All right.
So there you go, well done, well volunteered, Joe, thank you. And just watching Michael Kern in the Fricadelli Racing 911 GT3, just a tiny bit, just watching the car twitching. He's being ever so careful with it. It's almost pussyfooting it around in the rain there, and it's data gathering, it's information, but you've got to keep that car out of the barriers. And on that Nordschleife, we commented on it yesterday, Johnny, there is so little room. Some places there's barely a car's width of grass at the side before its barrier. So there really is not a lot of margin for error. You don't want to be making mistakes, going in a bit too deep, or just a bit of understeer because of the wet, or a bit of aquaplaning. And that's where people that know this place inside out have the advantage. Fabian Schillers, those types of the world that have driven so much around here, and they know what every nuance, every bump, every river, every bit of water there, and they know where it is. Keeps you busy, as if there isn't enough to do, and then you're going to do it for 24 hours.
And the other thing is the lack of visibility in this sort of weather system, because you've got the rainfall on the track. You then need only 2 cars to be side by side. That'll throw out an awful lot of spray into the face of those behind, and it's very tricky to pick out the road in front. How many cars are there? What speed are they doing? What class are they from? And you have split-second decisions to make, because you could very easily be in the lead gaggle for GT3 in the opening 1 or 2 hours, and a slip of concentration, a momentary lapse of do I go left or right, and that could be kissing goodbye to the lead of the race. But of course, if you're then either second or third, and the guy out front all of a sudden has all the disadvantage, because they are the first on the road. The number 31 Fricadelli Racing Porsche, which is the pro lineup for the regular NLS entrance, is just working its way now up the hill towards the carousel. So along the really fast section out of Exmüller, having negotiated Bergwerk, and now the long climb through Kesselchen, Klostertal, and the Caracciola carousel, which starts with a pretty tight right-hander actually, which is awkward to scrub the speed off the car, a little bit off camber, the right-hander, before you get to the carousel itself, which is properly cambered, but thankfully in your favour, rather than trying to tip you off the road on the outside. But definitely a tricky part of the track, particularly bearing in mind the inside of the carousel, very large concrete slabs, and when they get wet, it turns to pretty much ice. There's not a great deal of grip on sheer concrete, rather than the spores and the grain of asphalt. So a delicate and exact line required through the carousel. Spits you out the other side. That's exactly what car 31 has just done. By the way, it's Lars Kern at the wheel. I noticed there was another entry list released late last night. So far, the only difference I have made, it's labelled as a corrected or an amended entry list. The only difference being that Michael Kern, which I had spotted as a mistake, has been changed now to Lars Kern, which is his proper name.
They're obviously listening to you.
Maybe they were. Maybe they were. But I'm not sure whether that warranted another 11-page entry list just to change one person's name. But nevertheless, we have got it. Yeah, and it's your choice whether you print it or not. I've just decided to put a line through Michael and replace it with Lars LARS.
Old school.
Yeah, it is, precisely. Water being chucked up behind the car that remains fastest across all of the 3 sessions so far. Remember, we have had a 90-minute qualifying 1 session yesterday, held in the dry and the daylight. They had a 3-hour night practice, or qualifying session, technically speaking. That was qualifying, and if you'd managed to go quicker in Q2, that counts towards your grid position for all the classes outside SP9. And this is the 3rd qualifying session, so another opportunity to go quicker, but that will not be possible in the wet weather conditions, because, as I said, Q1 was held entirely with dry asphalt. So at least a chance to put some mileage in. Oh, Lamborghini with Marco Mappelli at the wheel, who, by the way, it's his time that remains the quickest across all 3 sessions from yesterday, an 8:11.428. But he was getting pinched a bit there by one of the lower order cars. Hopefully he managed to escape that incident, because focus was turned elsewhere. But I'll keep my eyes peeled on Marco Mappelli's opening sector time. The opening sector, by the way, is pretty much the whole of the Grand Prix track here, before you then head left through Hatzenbach and on towards the Nordschleife for your run around this 25.3 kilometre circuit. Still the 3 choices available to you at the end of the Grand Prix track. You can either turn left onto the Nordschleife, you can turn completely right and head into the pit lane, or you can choose the middle road, which feeds you back onto the Grand Prix circuit, and it's all neatly coned out. What that prevents you from doing, though, is coming off the Nordschleife and directly into the pits. You can't do that. What you have to do is a full lap of the Grand Prix circuit before ducking in via the back door, effectively, into the pits that way. Over the line goes the number 4 Mercedes, which is the orange and black livery car. All the Mercedes, the kind of key ones from HRT, running on Michelin tyres this year. Same pretty much for the Audis as well, with the exception of the number 7 car collection Audi, which is the one that Miro Konopka's been disqualified from. That car runs Goodyear Eagle tyres this year. Car collection historically have run the Dunlops, and generally speaking, got an entry list from last year with the tyres listed on it. You can transpose Dunlop into Goodyear this year, as is the case in lots of European motorsport from 19 into 20. The same has happened in the ELMS, British Touring Car Championship. You select it, and generally Goodyear, the umbrella, or rather the parent company to Dunlop, they have taken up the mantle motorsport-wise. Still listed as Michael Kern and various other places, I noticed, but it's definitely Lars, and he is at the wheel of the number 31, which is now coming out of Tiergarten, and will head across the line to tick up another lap. That car's managed an 8:27 previously, but 8:27.5 is its best lap. It's just done a 10:54, so there's an idea of how much slower the track is currently.
Phenomenal. I mean, it's 33 minutes slower. It's incredible. That is different, and it is just, we have a couple of scenes there from our footage locally, and you can see the Eifel Mountain, you can see the castle in the background, so it's not that enclosed, as it were, but there's almost onto the GP circuit. It's starting to look a little bit shiny. It's lighter and drier already, or less precipitous, and there's a little bit of sun burning through now, so we never know. It might just lighten up. I did say it's going to be a bit more lunchtime, although because of course we're heading that way because we're an hour ahead in Germany. So I did say about 2ish, so we're getting a bit closer to that. We are, we're 13:39 in Germany, aren't we? So heading towards 20 minutes off 2 o'clock. So that is exactly right, the forecast we've seen so far. I would still not suggest one could relax at the wheel of any of these cars. And we're focusing, as ever. It's very easy to be drawn to the what we call the SB9 cars from the NLS, the GT3 cars. Everybody is going to be out there on this. There's going to be all sorts of 23 classes of cars. We've got TCR cars, Cup 5, M240i BMWs, people like Tommy Coronel fronting that class. Very, very experienced GT and touring car racer in his day, and still out there. I think if there's pretty well a touring car race going on, he's in it somewhere in Europe.
Well, there are 2 this weekend that he's also taking part
in both of them.
On the same track.
Yeah. That's dedication, that is.
Well, it also promises that he's had plenty of track time, because those that are entered into the 24 but not the World TCR races won't have that opportunity. Admittedly, it's in different machinery, but still great to have the experience of the free practice and the qualifying that the touring car weekend includes, and not 3 races this year, as we have had in the past, but 2. That is so tricky through Schwedenkreuz currently with the wet weather out. I mean, Jelmer Berman had his huge crash there yesterday, and in the number 4 car currently, Adam Christodoulou. Well, I mean, where do you safely put the car there, Peter, when you've got so much standing water?
Well, nowhere near the curbs, especially on a loaded side. Unloaded, perhaps a little bit. We saw a little bit of that when we say unloaded, as in that side is not doing any work there onto the curbs. But wet paint,
yeah,
just gyrates a car like that, you would keep it off. It sounds really obvious, but it's so simple to do it as well. And Adam Christodoulou in the number 4 Mercedes at the moment has got a completely clear lap, so he's on his own. So he can pick and choose his line. So this is a great opportunity to pick up some real data for the team, because he's got no excuses, no back markers, nobody balking him. He just sit there and go out, and it is quite literally a data collection. And for him as well, through the seat of the car, feeling it. What is it like underneath him? How does it feel, as you say, watching different bits of it, keeping off the rumble strips there, well away from the curbs, and it doesn't look as slippy as you might have thought. Actually, it looks pretty well controlled there. The Porsche was having a bit more of a problem.
Yeah,
but it's that rear engine. Now we said yesterday that earlier in LLS this year, the KCMG Porsches, they've been absolutely outstanding in the wet. No, but they weren't so good in the in-between phase.
Yeah, and I know what you're saying about that halfway house condition, because all that really does, a little bit of rain just brings all the oil and the bits of tyre to the road surface and makes it even more treacherous. So better to have a fully wet track. And Adam Christodoulou, the West Midlander, pretty well known for being good in the wet conditions and judging, you know, corner to corner, because it's amazing. It was fully damp at Schwedenkreuz. He got to Adenauer Forst, and I'm not saying it was fully dry, but there wasn't anywhere near as much rainwater on the road. And it's this ability to adjust depending on where you are around a racetrack with such a large footprint. There is a slower car up ahead, so some spray to deal with. He's then got to say, what class is this car likely from? It's a BMW. In fact, there are 2 cars up ahead. No, make that 4 or 5. So gone is the clear road now, and he has to judge very quickly what sort of speed these cars are doing compared to his.
And some of those indicating out of the way, as in not moving out of the way, but indicating a visual signal that they've been seen. You're clear to go on the opposite side of the indicator if cars can do that, but it's not always the case. They can do it. You say 4 or 5 cars there cleared. He's just gone through Bergwerk on the way up to the long run to the carousel, isn't he?
Yeah.
And but a great car to be driving. The layout of that Mercedes on this big front engined, lots of weight, lots of torque. We commented yesterday on the lovely bass sound of that engine, but doesn't need to rev. Something like a Ferrari or a Lamborghini, mid-engined, very cammy, much higher revving. Last thing you want in the wet. You don't want to be spinning that up. You want to be short shifting. That's where the big front engine cars like the Mercedes, and I would say the Twitch. We've just seen the Conrad Motorsport Lamborghini with Marco Mappelli at the wheel, just exiting using a tiny bit of curb that wasn't even painted, just concrete. So no risk of paint. What did it do? It twitched. It moved straight away. Exactly what we were just saying. Like, ooh, I would like to be driving any car around there at the moment, don't get me wrong, but if you gave me a choice right now, I think an AMG Merc in these conditions would be such a safe bet, because it just does what it says on the tin. It's going to be reliable. You've got no issues with it mechanically, you know that. Hope I haven't jinxed anything there by saying that. Fingers crossed, touch wood, all those bits. They did his only qualifying 3. But as odds go, I'd look at that and go, that's probably one of the most reliable, safest bets to be, one of the best seats in the house. Lamborghini, you know you're going to have to watch it harder.
Yes.
It's going to twitch you, it's going to catch you, you have to work harder. The carousel, you said yesterday, Johnny, that you go into it, it's banked, it's all concrete, it's banked, it's all right until you come out of it. Then you've got that sudden change of camber where it flicks over, and the cars can spit you out. Added it's wet as well, and yeah, these guys, it's just a Sunday drive, isn't it, really? But they're not really doing anything, are they?
The Mercedes, I think you're right, is that you speak to a lot of AM drivers, bronze and silver rated drivers, they say it's very forgiving. It gives you a lot of notice as to what it's going to do before it does it, whereas Lamborghini, Ferrari, maybe not. And We have seen those cars, and some Audis as well, actually, switch ends. And in the wet, particularly, those moments have not been able to be caught, and they've resulted in some serious accidents around the Nordschleife through the years. You're tuned to RS1, part of the Radio Show Limited network of channels. Peter Snowden and Johnny Palmer, and delighted to say, as with yesterday, that we can now beam across to the Woking data centre to get a little bit of Paul Truswell in as well, because Paul, I gave you some indication as to where we sit when you combine all of these. 3 sessions, 2.5 sessions as we sit, but you're looking at the times that have been set exclusively in qualifying 3.
I would totally agree with you, Paul, that yeah, there's definitely a bit of blue sky out there, and it is getting brighter and lighter, albeit slowly. I think your description of marginally is absolutely spot on. Nice to see out there the number 44 Falcon Motorsport Porsche of Peter Dunbreg, which had that off yesterday. So that's one of the cars that has returned. That was one of the cars that had a. We did wonder actually whether that was going to be not necessarily a red flag that we had with the HRT a bit later on, but it was certainly a big off, and there was a lot of debris of that car on the side of the track. It was facing the opposite way.
Yeah.
But it's back out again, looking complete and whole and showroom new. Never raced or rallied. Ready for you to buy, sir. But yes, Paul.
And do you think the team yet, Paul, have actually made that decision as to which one they're going to do? Because I was hopeful when you used the word rebuilt. You said the 4 car, that's the one not being rebuilt, but we don't know yet whether it's going to have to be a fresh car. Right. All right. Oh, the Peter Dumbrek car, despite it's off last night, is not hanging around and dropped a couple of wheels onto the grass on the hats and back in these slippery conditions. So Peter Dumbrek clearly not fazed by the crash at Adenauer Forst in the darkness yesterday evening, and is still pushing hard. Has just done a 10 minutes 16.2. Nowhere near again the best lap time for that car, which was set in qualifying 1 yesterday, an 8:22.
I think given Peter Dumbrek's history and surviving that Mercedes flip at Le Mans, I think a little bit of a twitch on an exit. I'm not trying to put it down, but it's no big deal, is it, when you've been airborne into the trees at Le Mans in a Mercedes in, what was that, 1999?
Yeah.
Yes.
It never ceases to amaze me. Yeah. Oh, that was all before I was born.
Yeah, absolutely. You've seen the film in the archives there. Yeah.
It never ceases to amaze me quite how this ability of a racing driver, though, to just completely forget about yesterday. They might have had a crash. They might have clanged the barrier several times. That didn't happen. I mean, there must be some recognition deep in the brain, but you can turn all that off and just go hell for leather again the following day.
But it was interesting even talking to him at the time, because we worked on an event just after that as it happened, and the event we're referring to, for those that are not aware, was a full Le Mans car going airborne and flipping and rotating off into the trees. Quite extraordinarily, it was the only set of trees that they'd cut down during the week before, had cleared, so it landed in a clearing on its wheels, which he thought was a great advantage. But talking to Peter about it, he just said at the time, and his quote was, "I felt the front end go light, then I saw the sky, then I knew I was in trouble."
Yeah.
And it was 3 simple statements like that, and that was it. There was nothing else. The rest of it, he said, I woke up, he said, and then there was a gendarme, because it's a public road, the gendarme wanted to have a breath test. Quite literally, he said, I haven't had a drink for a week, and he said, and that actually mystified and annoyed him more than the shunt. And if you actually watch that on YouTube now, it's an amazing accident. But
yeah, and story is Mark Webber did exactly the same thing earlier on in the week, although the cameras didn't catch that, but he knows for sure that that's exactly what happened.
Well, it was the third, there were 3 of them, and actually they drew the cars from the race there, yes. Mark Webber's was a little bit different, because he went on his roof in the warm-up and came down the track on the roof and down to one of the escape roads. But that was then, this is now. We're talking about drivers just having that mentality of being able to, no pun intended, quite literally park a situation like that, and it's... yeah, they get on with it. It's a bit like Niki Lauda. He always said that his amazing accident he had here to survive that accident at Nürburgring back in '76, and he always said, "I didn't break a bone. It was only psychological. It was just me. I had to deal with it." And it was that way of compartmentalising it to you and I, mere mortals. You're just like, what?
Yeah.
If you have an accident on the road and say that to only your friends, family, you're like, oh, you okay, and whatever. Even tap somebody in traffic or a bollard or something. We don't expect it. These guys, it's part of the furniture, is what happens, and they just walk up and just, right, fine, let's get on with it.
Yeah, and you can bet he gave the team a full debrief, Peter Dumbrek, at the end of the incident when he got back. Goodness knows what time of night that was yesterday evening. Although the red flag probably helped, with the session waved to an end 30-odd minutes before it was due to. And yeah, by the time he got back to the team, they will have wanted to know exactly what happened and how he ended up in that situation. We still don't know whether there were other cars involved. Most likely, yes, but very tricky to have, obviously, the whole of this circuit covered at all the one time. That's the one advantage of a few of virtual racing. You can put the cameras wherever you want. Sometimes you can revisit a scene where the cameras weren't there first time of asking. Not the same in real life, sadly. And we have had a couple of incidents already yesterday where we are still trying to investigate exactly the cause of them. Jelmer Berman giving a report to the German press, and good to see the Dutchman up and about at the very least, carrying possibly a slight injury to a shoulder, as Paul suggested. Martin Tomczyk at the wheel of the Schnitzer BMW, just heading down towards Exmuller. This sequence of continually tightening right and left-handers, then he plummet down the one side of the valley, over the road bridge, and then back up the other side after the tricky Bergwerk corner. John Hindhaugh regularly calls that Nicky Lauda corner, because that's the scene, of course, of Nicky's terrible accident in the 70s. And then
I love how you refer to in the 70s, because it's just
76.
so before you. What
well,
date?
you'd meant,
What date?
I have no idea what the date was.
Oh, God, 1st of August, man. I thought you knew your history. 1st of August, 1976.
You'd already said 1976, so I thought I would open it up a little bit, covering my very much lack of knowledge.
They've even made a film for millennials like you called Rush, so you can understand it more.
Yeah, but it's terrible.
No, it's not. It's such a great piece of entertainment.
Almost as good as Le Mans 66.
Oh, brilliant, brilliant. Yeah, just get Joe Bradley on that and you'll never talk about the race on either of those.
I'll avoid that topic. The sun is peeping out through the clouds, you know, and yeah, we've got, it's almost like a sort of early morning light, that golden light that I think is emphasised by the brown and the yellow leaves that you get at this time of year. That's certainly not something I'm used to in normally a May or June race. Yeah, and the teams have also had to deal with the leaf fall on the line, as John Gore put it last weekend, considering his GTE Astons. So slippery, wet conditions with broken up leaves really is not a good combination, and those leaves can end up in the air intakes as well, which will all of a sudden send the engine temperature to the sky. I noticed the driver's now been changed by the ID for the 42, because it wasn't Augusto Farfus at the wheel of that car when I last checked, so I think we put the Brazilian in now rather than Martin Tomczyk, as I mentioned a couple of seconds ago.
So it's not normal to change a driver halfway around a lap, is it?
Not ideal, certainly. We've had a few of those instances already today, though. And I'm not sure whether that's driver error, operator error, and forgetting to put the ID to the correct position, or it's just a delay in the data reaching the time systems.
Whoever it may be in that number 42, we're being told it is Augusto Farfus. You're absolutely right, Johnny, and Paul, the assertion that it is getting brighter. There was even a run up to just after Bergberg on the run up to the carousel, where it was visibly sunny in the trees for that little bit, only that one part of it. So maybe it is brightening up, that's good. But Augustus Farfus, that we are being told that's in the 42 BMW M6, the Schnitzer car, that is as twitchy as anything, and that's not even using the curbs. He's having real trouble getting the power down, and I think we're starting to get to that stage of the track that we said the drivers dislike so much. Paul spotted it first. Certain areas of it are most definitely starting to dry out relatively, but it's such a long lap, of course. At the moment they're completely sideways for, it's almost historic driving there for Farfus, with it completely sideways. I didn't even thought he was on crosswise around somewhere like Spa in it. But you can look at the track and see that it's so patchy, and bits of it look they almost lure you in. Oh, that looks okay. I've got some grip here. I've got relatively, and all of a sudden it's wet. The next bit. This is a problem being in under the trees, and again, just another element these drivers have got to deal with all the time.
Paul.
Yeah, Augusto Farfus yet to do a lap in this session. So he's that's a full lap of the Nordschleife. He's been out and gone around the Grand Prix loop a couple of times, but still on his first time around the full Grand Prix Strecker. In terms of the drivers that have actually changed over halfway through the session now, most of the drivers have stayed aboard. Certainly as far as the guys who have been setting the quick times, no driver change. The number 22 car has changed. That's Daniel Juncadella now at the wheel of the 22 Mercedes, having taken it over from Thomas Jaeger. Mark Bassek has taken over in the number 831. And the other change notable, perhaps, the 31 Riccadelli, we mentioned, started by Lance Kerr. That behind the wheel of it.
All right, thank you for that. Augusto Farfus will very shortly have a lap to his name, because he's on the Duttinger Höhe now and setting absolute best times, but they are within this session alone, because he's still going to be well north of an 8 minutes 11, which was set by Marco Mappelli in qualifying 1. We're already at 9.5 minutes, and he hasn't yet exited Tiergarten, so it's going to be closer to 9 minutes 50 by the time he reaches the end of the lap, but that's still going to represent a decent time, and further evidence that the lap is improving progressively. So Engels 9:52.3, Timo Bernhardt 9:57.9, and Farfus Farfus in the 42 car. Still waiting for his time to pop up. 9:47 it was. 9:47.849 for Brazilian driver Augusto Farfus, changing one front-engined Aston Martin, the Aston Martin he raced at Le Mans last weekend, to a BMW, his kind of more familiar car.
But that's the fastest lap of the session, Johnny. So say it with a bit more enthusiasm.
I apologise. It's because I'm looking at a screen which still displays him in 14th, so that penny hadn't quite dropped. But yes, it is. You're quite right.
And by a healthy chunk as well, 4 seconds and some quicker than what was the previous best, which was the number 19 KCMG Porsche. So BMW, Porsche 1 and 2. Then Mercedes third, in fourth fast, and that's the number 4 car which Madame Costadulu was driving, now in the hands of Mauro Engel. Then fourth fastest is the Phoenix Audi, which is in the hands of Kelly Beretta. And so BMW, Mercedes, Audi, the top 4. And then another Porsche is the Huber Motorsport Porsche R25, which is 5th fastest in today's session. But very few, if any, improvements on times that were set yesterday, and certainly in yesterday's 2-hour session. No, it wasn't 2 hours, was it? It was an hour and a half. In yesterday's hour and a half session in the morning, that was when most of the quick time we had 3 hours of night practice, which actually only was 2.5, as Johnny was saying, because it was cut short with the red flag. But no, that was all nearly all dry weather running, so not really an opportunity for teams to improve on yesterday's times today, although the opportunity exists to do so. All 3 of the qualifying sessions do count positions.
Yeah, and this is effectively last chance saloon now for your car if you are not running in SP9, SP Pro or SPX, because every other category, their grid order is set by this session, yesterday's night practice, night qualifying, and the earlier 90-minute session. And although track conditions are steadily improving, it's clearly pretty much dry in certain areas, or a dry line has emerged. Still very greasy and very wet on the hats and back, and the run down towards Adenauer Forst. Number 29, Audi Sport Team Lant entry for René Rast is hauling his way up the hill towards the highest point on the circuit, which is Hohe Acht, the top end of the run from the carousel, and then he'll head to Wipperman and Brunchen. This lap could be even quicker though than Augusto Farfus's effort in the BMW. If you're slightly puzzled as to what happens to the SP9s and that single SPX car, the Glickenhaus, plus the SP Pro, which is that crossover Porsche number 35, well, they are automatically entered into top qualifying either 1 or 2. If you have pre-qualified, you go into qualifying 2. There are 13 cars that have already done that, and 4 extra places up for grabs. And in order to obtain one of those, you've got to finish in the top 4 in Q1, which at the moment includes 18 cars. Big question marks as far as the number 2 Mercedes is concerned, whether that'll be involved, because it's either being rebuilt or they're finding a completely new shell for that car. So not sure whether we'll get the full 18, but it'll be 18 down to 4, all being well. And the 4 are added then into Q2, which is a further straight shootout. Each car has 1 driver and 2 laps of theoretically a clear Nordschleife to set your time and therefore your grid position. And the order of which the cars are sent off in, selected completely at random, and that draw, I think, is yet to be made, Paul. It's later on today.
It is later on today.
Yeah.
Shuffling of paper in the background. And it is something like 4:30.
Yeah, in the press room, I think.
Yes, usually it takes place in the middle of the paddock, and it's a bit like a market square with a kind of public drawing of lottery, and usually we get nice sunny weather for it, and everybody's having a good time and gets the opportunity to take some photos, get some autographs, but behind closed doors it won't be quite such an event. But nevertheless, yes, you're right, it is drawn, and that if the weather is going to continue to be uncertain, then it's going to potentially be quite a significant draw as well.
Yes, because you're not necessarily going to get stable conditions throughout what is a long session, actually. When you combine the two, it's over a couple of hours to get through it. And therefore, well, maybe an hour and a half, actually. But therefore, the weather could change notably from start to finish. And it becomes a little bit of a lottery in that respect. René Rast has reached the end of the Dottinger Höhe. He's heading now through the very fast left-hand kink, which is easily flat in one of these aero-dependent Audi R8 LMS cars. And now heading into the much slower Tiergarten with a Pixum Team Adrenaline BMW up ahead in their familiar orange and blue colours. Pixum Team Adrenaline based at the Nürburgring and provide effectively an arrive and drive service for those wanting to take part in the N24. So there are a number of Pixum cars up and down the entry. Rover BMW feeding in from the right as well, almost alongside René Rast. That car having just completed a Grand Prix lap, but deciding not to go onto the Nordschleife quite yet. Still 18.5 minutes to go, Peter Snowden.
I was just thinking that. So, yeah, it's quite extraordinary, the mixture of what you can do with that coned bit of the Grand Prix straight there. And it's I'm not going to go onto the Nordschleife yet. I'm going to do a bit more intel here. I'm going to come back. You've got cars coming in, cars joining, cars trying to do qualify times. We know it's not qualifying, it's data collection right now. But just that one area there, as you said, you've got that. You've got an SP9 GT3 car coming up behind a GT Cup car category, the Pixum Adrenaline car you mentioned. Two totally different speeds, two totally different types of cars. The Pixum car keeps the right out of the way, but mustn't go through too near the cones.
No.
You've got another SP9 car coming out that, is he going to do a lap or not? Then others coming out from the pit lane, and they've got to stay on the blend line. And there's all sorts, they're all doing their own thing. And they've got every right to do their own thing, but you're sitting there and on the left-hand side thinking, I'll just keep to the left, but equally, I don't want to put a tyre or wheel on the white line because all of a sudden that can suddenly grab me and we're off. And it's something as stupid as that, or as insignificant as that, you think. You're actually trying to keep out of the way of other people because everybody's got a right to be out on the track. I'll keep myself out of trouble. And you actually put yourself into trouble just by moving a little bit too far out of the way because there's such a collection of speed differences going on one tiny bit of tarmac, and that's just a pit straight on the Grand Prix.
I know. Yeah, you're not even on the Nordschleife by that point. It's having ultimate awareness, and I mean it's a little bit like driving through roadworks through a contraflow on the M1 because you're presented with all these different routes and cones, and you have to remember, and you have to, I suppose, base your mind in the moment. Should I be here right now? What's that car going to do next? Where are we all going to be when we get to turn one?
Well, I thought the M1 was just contraflow these days. I didn't think there was anything that was 70 mile an hour anymore. I think it was just.
We've been promised it will open at some stage, but
we've been promised a lot.
A number of years
let's
on.
Not go there. Let's not go there. Yes, promising one thing, over-promise, under-deliver. Yes,
is the old phrase. Yes.
So we've got a. Just noted, is there somebody off? Because we've got.
There is.
Yes, it's one of the robots. Is that 101?
No, that's the Valkenhorst BMW, I believe.
Number 101. 90 degrees across the track, and is that just as is it Hatzenbach just going onto the circuit, onto the Nordschleife?
Early on in the Nordschleife lap, yes.
And that's almost as if it's just, I'm going to say, half swapped end. It's almost like it's gone 90 degrees. It's rejoined, but it's doesn't appear to be any damage. Doesn't look like it's gone off completely, but it's like, as it gone to the Hatzenbach, the right-hander, it's suddenly done 90 degrees and just swapped itself right and stopped. I wonder what's caused that, apart from obvious track conditions. But again, not exactly an undermanned car, that.
No, and what we need to find out now is which of the Von Bolens is at the wheel. Paul's probably got a more detailed timing screen that includes first names, but in the 100 car, we have two family members from the Von Bolens, Friedrich and Mario, and they are joined by Andreas Ziegler and Henry Valkenhorst, who is the team owner, as the name would suggest. And Christian Cronjes, David Pittard, Mikkel Jensen and Jordan Pepper make up the lineup in the pro side of the Valkenhorst BMW. They have two M6 GT3s, and the majority of the Valkenhorst BMWs, actually, additionally to the SP9s, there's some M4s running in this race as well. And as far as I can tell, they're all on Yokohama tyres, which is historically their chosen tyre manufacturer. So Audi and Mercedes principally going on Michelins, but we've got two BMWs on the Japanese rubber.
We've got Mario von Boland at the wheel of the 100 at the moment, Johnny.
Okay, thank you for that.
I think that was what the question was.
It was. Yeah, I thought I'd give you a little bit of time to get the necessary data. 100 and 101 already into top qualifying too, so they don't have to concern themselves with putting a lap in that will at least qualify them to be in the top 13, or the 13 that we have already assigned to that second session. And that's all going to take place later on today. And in the UK, we will be on air at 4:40 here on RS1 to cover that whole session, and in depth. Obviously, there's quite a lot of backstory that we will need to cover through the course of the previous 3 sessions. But 5:40 Central European summertime through till 7:15. So that's what I mean about it being a long session, including 2 separate runs potentially for 4 cars.
But the general structure, although it is fundamentally different in the idea of having Q1 and Q2 from previous years, if you watch the Nürburgring 24 or listen to it with us on Radio Show Limited, the general structure is the same. You get 2 bites at the cherry, you get 2 laps, and you choose the better one of the 2. Yeah. And cars get released from the pit lane rather than being released from the track, but they get released at 30-second intervals. So theoretically, at least, they've got quite a bit of a gap between them. But we do see it, we've seen this before in previous qualifying, Johnny, that there is the opportunity, because it's such a long lap, that 30-second gap can get squashed up, and you do actually end up having to battle with another car, but having another car in the way, either on its quick lap, or worse, if it's still doing its installation lap, and you're on your quick lap.
We have had incidents where cars have had accidents on their qualifying laps as well. So all of you behind that, all of a sudden into yellow flags and potentially a code 60, which will utterly scupper your chance of qualifying well. So yes, 30 seconds apart from the pit lane for stage 1, and then more cars introduced for stage 2, and there is that crossover of 4 cars of the qualifiers. 29 down towards the right and left, the Yokohama S, which starts this configuration of the Nordschleife, or the Nürburgring Nordschleife combined, the Gesamtstrecke. A moment or 2 ago, a moment for the Valkenhorst BMW and an Audi arriving on scene. This is after the Valkenhorst incident, and he has to then straight line a significant chunk of the Hatson back there, Peter.
Well, it is over the curb, down across the grass, and rejoined. And quite apart from the lap time's kind of irrelevant, because it's just going to be annoying actually to drive. You're going to feel nonplussed at yourself at best, but it's the collateral damage, what that can do to the car underneath. It's just bounced over the curbs. It doesn't take them to the air or anything quite like that, but they're not meant to do that. They're meant to run on smooth tarmac racetracks, and hitting a curb, we've got splitters and bits of carbon underneath, and it's collateral, and what it might do, something else that may not appear really obvious now, but it appears 2 or 3 hours time, or more importantly, into the race. And it's obviously engineers will go around in there, but it can damage air jacks, all sorts of things. You suddenly come into the pit stop and you think, oh, got away with that, just gone across the grass, no problem. Finish your stint, come in, and the air jacks don't work, and all of a sudden you've got a problem.
Yeah,
stay on the grey stuff.
Well, that's always the best bet. But speaking of moments that actually don't manifest themselves till actually many hours later, there was an incident for the Mann-Filter Mercedes in last year's race, when I'm pretty sure it was Raffaele Marciello who had contact side to side with another car in one of the lower classes at the Dunlop hairpin. Now that actually dinged a steering arm, which didn't break until 2 hours later, when there was an entirely different driver at the wheel, Maxi Gertz, and all of a sudden the steering broke and it pitched him into the Armco barrier. No warning whatsoever. And driver A, hugely apologetic for putting that situation on driver B. But I mean, that's the beauty of a shared race, and the fact that we're racing for 24 hours. A component can start to break, but doesn't fully break until 1, 2, 3 hours later.
Yeah, I wouldn't describe it as the beauty of it, but
from our perspective,
from my driver B's point of view, it's not. No, and nor is it for the guild of driver A, for that matter.
Well, I thought from the fans, I thought it was great, because you had to have been watching many hours before for the story to make sense.
The point you're highlighting is that, of course, that these cars are designed to work in a certain way. It's a very small operating window actually, on a track in a certain direction, whatever. A little bit of tap on the side, and it's not designed to take it. As you say, something there, just it's really
it's strong in one direction,
Correct.
but not in the other, because it's not designed to take that stress.
Yeah. And it's that's how they're designed.
Yeah.
Just watching a little bit of footage for us of the Conrad Lamborghini. That's the car that's still topping the timesheets. Obviously, from its time from yesterday, that 8:11.428 that you commented on earlier, Johnny. It's now got Pereira at the wheel of that. This is the number 21 car I'm talking about. It's Frank Pereira at the wheel of that car at the moment. It's Huracan GT3 Evo. 3 abreast coming down the Dottinger as the KCMG Falcon and Rover BMW, all 3 abreast down the Dottinger up to the Tiergarten together. Anybody would think it was the last lap of the 24-hour.
It could
or
well
an NLS
be.
round. There they are, all line astern. And again, it's that, let's not get sucked into it. Let's not do it. What was interesting, just going back to that Conrad Lamborghini with Frank Pereira at the wheel, it was porpoising and bucking all over the place. It didn't look stable, I've got to be honest, and I don't know whether it was just a particular track shot or where it was particularly bumpy, but I hadn't noticed that yesterday. It didn't look exactly stable. And
no,
it was a bit of a bumpy ride in that.
I still get the feeling that Lamborghini is set up for qualifying pace. Now, whether that's done through the rake,
Stiff, yeah,
or where it's suspension settings. But we have commented a few times already with Axel Jeffries at the wheel that he's had 1 or 2 squirrely moments through the. It was coming out of the Kleiner carousel and then through the Yokohama S. It doesn't look. It looks really manoeuvrable. You know, very pointy. But I think it could snap on a driver with 0 notice. So, are they using that sort of setup to extract the very most of speed out of it, but potentially risking a crash because of it?
I think you're spot on. It'll be interesting to know what the time's doing, and Paul probably got more intel on that, what Frank Pereira is doing in that car at the moment. But you say change directions, no issue at all. But linear, it's like it's porpoising, it's bucking around, and you just think, oh, that's in a straight line. So getting that power down, we were talking about that, rear engine, and Paul was quite rightly saying earlier that the advantage of a rear mid-engine car is that you've naturally got free weight over the rear wheels, the driven wheels. Yes, you have, but you've got a naturally lighter front end, and Porsches are notorious for that, for the way you have to brake with them. You can't brake in a straight line, finish your braking and turn in. You've got to trail brake these cars in, keep coming over. That's why they run so much rake in them. You've got to get that front end loaded, because it's all very well having the traction, but the traction is out of the corner. It's no good if you can't turn the front end of the car into the corner, and you've suddenly got understeer, and it becomes a problem. And most drivers, as I said yesterday, most drivers don't like understeer. There are a few that do, but I classify them in the Flat Earth Society.
I know what you're saying. Totally.
It's out there now. It's out there running around.
6 3/4 minutes to go. The really nice paint job on the number 5 Audi is yellow, red and blue. I'm really impressed with the organisers of this race, who have now issued a sort of final entry list with the full spotters guide. And you're not talking about photographs of the cars that are weeks, months, years old. They have been taken this weekend. So if you head to the web address 24H hyphen Rennen, the German word for race, .de /Teilnehmer. So that's TEILNEHMER, Teilnehmer hyphen 2020. There is a full list of all the cars in the race and what liveries they're running in as well. And I've even let Peter know about this, because I was keeping it secret for a while.
I am hugely impressed on 2 levels. A, that you managed to get that in there into a broadcast, and Teilnahme, whole web address in there. But more importantly, that in our second day of commentary, you're starting to share things. There is hope for us yet.
It's for the greater good, Snowy, at the end of the day.
But you're keeping the jelly babies to yourself, aren't you?
Yes, they are all mine.
I noticed that pot moved to your side of the desk.
There's 2 bags worth in there, but they are all mine. So yeah, 24H-Rennen.de /Teilnehmer-2020, and all the drivers I think are update as well. So up to date rather. So there have been some changes, obviously, with 9 Porsche drivers not able to take part in this year's race after a breakout of COVID-19 at Le Mans last weekend. But all that's been taken into account as well, and a really valuable resource. Not sure who's put that together, but I'm going to be referring to that throughout the race.
Now, Johnny, there is spray, but considerably less spray. It's exactly what Paul Trezol referred to. He said, I'm gonna push it out there and say marginally. He was spot on, accurate as ever, Paul. That yes, it is actually. It's not even just March. It's getting significantly brighter and sunnier on the Grand Prix section there. I would hesitate to say there's almost a bit of a dry line starting to develop on certain parts of the track. Certainly around the GP circuit. Less so on the tricky bit.
Indeed, and that sort of depends on whether the road section's got a crown, so drainage slightly better, whether the camber's in your favour, positive camber or negative camber, and sometimes the rain just sits on the road because it's perfectly flat. It also accumulates around the curb and on the white lines, which is exactly what Peter was saying earlier on, because the white lines, if you do catch them, are like ice, and the track, rather the car, will rotate on you almost straight away. We are at a point where the wet weather's tyres are still the order of the day for me, because enough of this 25-kilometre circuit is still too damp. Paul?
Yeah, I agree with you, absolutely. It's nothing but wet tyres, although the option does exist, intermediates and 2 different grades of intermediate available to certainly the SB9 category cars. The GT3 top teams will have 2 different versions of intermediate tyres that they can put on. So there's plenty of choice out there. But the other thing which affects the track drying out is the number of overhanging trees. Certainly in areas as you, for example, go through Arenberg and up towards the Fuchsrohr, there's a lot of trees overhanging the circuit, and that really does slow down the rate at which the track can dry out. Other bits, around the Grand Prix loop, it dries out very quickly because it's quite open in that part of the circuit. So you really do have to have your wits about you about how much grip there is there. Of course, if you're only doing a single lap, doesn't really matter. But when you're doing it over the course of a 7-lap stint, an 8-lap stint, then being consistent and pushing on every corner is so crucial, so vital to be able to get those times in.
And just going back to the topic of intermediates, Paul, are you allowed to hand cut a slick, or is that right? So is that the grade 1 of intermediates, effectively?
Yeah, as long as it's properly hand cut. You can't sort of just get your penknife out and do it amateurly. It has to be done professionally and inspected. But yes, hand cut slicks are allowed.
And then are there additionally 2 more intermediates that are produced by the tyre manufacturer?
No.
Right. So what? Yeah. Okay. So one is the one you've done yourself, and the other one is kind of produced by the tyre people.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Understood. Raffaele Marciello. Sorry. Go on.
I was just going to say they will all be produced by the manufacturer. Teams themselves won't be cutting grooves in tyres because they just don't have the equipment to do it safely.
Okay.
Do not try this at home, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes. So it has to be done by a Michelin or Goodyear tyre technician.
Yes. And an excellent caveat to add there. You're just saying that, Johnny, Raffaele Marciello
pulling no punches on this lap, I would suggest.
I think definition of on it, as he came up behind one of the Ferrari, I think it was the Hella Padgett Racing 1 Ferrari, I think it came up with, that was admittedly, I would say it was an outlap, but he was sufficiently far around the Nordschleife not to be going quite as slow as he was. And Raffaele Marciello certainly took a lot of curb and virtually took to the grass to avoid it because he wasn't slowing down. And it was almost like it was a GT Cup car or something else. It was the same category car, for heaven's sake.
I know.
And he just shot through, and I say nearly over the grass, just getting on with it. Damp, wet, sort of slippy,
it was also
tricky. There was no messing about with that one.
It was also bruncheon, which is where a lot of the time when you're on it, all 4 wheels leave the ground, for goodness sake. So you go off over quite a large lip there, and dodging around a Ferrari is, something that Raffaele Marciello is clearly very comfortable with, but I've always thought in his early days of single-seaters that he was somewhat otherworldly in his judgment of how fast you can run in these halfway house conditions. The sun is shining very nicely now at Flansgarten, and although there are trees on the right-hand side of the circuit, there aren't overhanging trees as you've got at the Foxhole. So that's actually, I won't say warming up, but it is the water is being burnt off quite nicely there.
It's certainly brightening up, isn't it, in the sky? It's looking nice. So who knows? I'll just do a quick weather check while you.
Okie doke. Well, we've only got 10 seconds left of this session. Obviously, if you're already on a lap where you haven't seen the checkered flag, you can complete that, and it will appear on the timing sheet at the end of the session. The Dottinger Höhe in certain areas as well is developing a dry line, and the higher speeds probably helping with that as well. But well over to the left is the desired line for Dennis Olsen, and then he veers completely to the other side of the track, interestingly. So searching around for the wet parts of the circuit.
Keeping those tyres cool, doesn't he, Dennis Olsen?
Yeah, so
that KCMG car.
The Norwegian is set for racing both the 18 and the 19. At least he can do, because he's been entered into both. Remains to be seen whether he will regularly feature in each of those cars. Sometimes that is purely a matter for the entry list, and he'll dedicate his time and his stints to one particular car. But at least KCMG do have the option, and yeah, where he can pick and choose which part of the circuit he's going to use, he's doing exactly that. So the Dottinger Her being 5-6 car widths wide, plenty of opportunity to do that, as now he sees the checkered flag. So that'll be the end of session for car 18. It's a 9:32.033, which could actually be the quickest time of that whole session. It's going to run it close. 9:32.033. I don't think any car above him on the timing screen collectively has gone quicker than that in Q3, Paul.
Absolutely right, Johnny. Yeah, so on not necessarily his very last lap anyway of the session, still opportunities for others to improve, but that is the fastest time from Q3, the 1 hour session, and evidence, if it were needed, that track conditions certainly were improving towards the end of that session. If we could have had another half hour of it, then they would have tumbled still further, I'm quite sure.
Well, just looking down the list of cars that are already into qualifying 2 for later on today, neither of the KCMG cars feature. They are eligible, obviously, for Q1 though, and they will be encouraged, I'm sure, by the speed offered by the 18, and you've got to think it can be matched by the number 19 car as well. But interestingly, when you combine all 3 sessions that we have had, the top 4 cars are not pre-qualifiers. So that's the 21 Conrad Motorsport Lamborghini of Axel Jeffries, Frank Pereira, Marco Mapelli, who's at the time, and Michele Di Martino. You've got the Phoenix Racing number 5 car for Kim-Louis Schramm, Michele Beretta, Jules Gounon and Frank Stippler. The 4 Mercedes, Adam Christodoulou, Maro Engel, Lukas Stoltz and Manuel Metzger. That still needs to bag a place into qualifying 2. And that KCMG Porsche, as I say, neither of those Hong Kong cars are in yet. So I just wonder whether, well, certainly the top 4 collectively across the session have a strong chance of being the 4 that you bolt onto the 13 that are already there. And Maro Engel going to finish a lap now as well. I'm going to hazard a guess, Paul, that the drivers in number 4 have all had a chance in this session as well, because that's exactly how they played Qs 1 and 2. So have we had the full driver rotation in car number 4?
I'll have to check that. Certainly Maro Engel and Christodoulou have driven, but in fact it was only the 2 of them.
Okay.
Yeah, so just those 2, with the other pair, Lukas Stoltz and Manuel Metzger, not having had a drive in that session, although they did both have a go in both Q1 and Q2.
Yes. Yeah, so they're not short of mileage, but I think they, 1 or 2 would have been grateful of some wet weather running in the daylight. Because
all of those drivers, though, so experienced.
True enough, yeah.
At the Nürburgring, the team is experienced, and even though they may not have absolute pace, they're pretty much carrying all the hopes now of HRT until we get further news about what might be happening to the number 2 car, and still no further news as to whether that car might be repaired or replaced. So HRT will then just be concentrating on the number 4 car, not the number 2.
Yeah. Talking about the number 3 car there, Marcus Winkelhock, just as he came up towards Tiergarten, just then Dottinger slowed down dramatically, almost as if there was a mechanical problem. I was half expecting the car to peel off to one side, and it wasn't a moment, it wasn't an half or anything. He just suddenly slowed the pace right down, like he'd lost drive or power or something. Slowed it right down, potted through Tiergarten, and then completely gunned it over the line. Yeah. Despite the flag being out, it was a slightly strange scenario. I've not really seen that before.
No, it was...
I'm not quite sure what the thinking was.
Yeah, whether there was a glitch or a problem and then it cleared itself, don't know. But he was certainly on the ragged edge heading into the kink at the end of the Dottinger Her, so there's no problem up until then. And the number 3 car which currently doesn't feature in the top 10 on combined times at least. Set a reasonable time, I think about 9:40 that showed up as, certainly sub 10 minutes. Klaus Bachler still out on the Nordschleife, and he's nearing the end of this lap as well for the Austrian. This is the Falcon Motorsport number 33 car, so the car that didn't have the problem yesterday. And yeah, the run to the line now down this incredibly long straight, the Dottinger Höhe, which runs parallel with the public road. But you're going somewhat quicker than that road traffic, heading up to Nürburgring Castle away in the distance, up to your right-hand side.
You're an absolute master of understatement, aren't you?
You're probably 3 times the speed or 4 times the speed of that single carriageway road. Yeah. So into the Tiergarten, and shaving just a small amount of speed off initially, and then it is a much bigger application of the brake. Up onto the curb, which is steadily being worn away actually, and more dirt being brought out to the track as well in these difficult wet conditions, and over the line. So Klaus Bachler, it is going to be a 9:37.657, which isn't quicker than Dennis Olsen's time, but it's still pretty good for the Austrian.
Fourth on today. Fourth on today.
Okay, 4th fastest for another Porsche. So we got Porsche fastest, Paul, in Q3. And what about
sorry, yes. Yeah, so sorry, he's 3rd fastest. There's a rogue time in there somewhere, which the timekeepers haven't corrected. You know how some of those times suddenly come in and they're wrong.
Yeah.
So we've got a rogue one in there, which is what was confusing me. So it is Dennis Olsen quickest with his Porsche.
Yes.
The Phoenix Racing Audi is 2nd with a 9:37.618, and then not very much slower than that is the Klaus Bachler Porsche, the Falcon car number 33, with a 9:37.657.
And the next car
is the number 4 Adam Christodoulou Maro Engel HRT Mercedes at 9:40.104, followed by the other KCMG Porsche car number 19, Eduardo Liberati, driving it towards the end of the session there with a 9:40.923. But all of those times, just to reflect for a moment, at 9.5 minutes for the full Gesamtstrecke, compared to a best lap done in the dry conditions of 8:11. It's a minute and 20 seconds slower. Now, you know, yes, conditions were wet, but they weren't improving. If you just think about that, you know, you're losing over a minute, 80 seconds around the track just because it's a bit damp. I mean, it really does show you not only how hard they're pushing, but how hard they must be pushing as well when it's fully dry.
Yeah. And yeah, what I was trying to work out is whether there was one particular car, one particular chassis type that might be favourable in these conditions. And first few cars I wrote down were Porsche, and I thought, oh, have we got a pattern here? But actually Audi and Mercedes very much present in that top 4. But I always love these cars are very carefully balanced. Their performance is carefully examined by the officials, and then a little bit of weight here and there. They can turn the turbos up and down as well, and they try and get the same lap time produced from very, very different cars. But obviously, when we get the changeable conditions, some cars are favourable. And it's always fascinating to me trying to work out which ones they are early on in the weekend. Steady stream of cars again, though, at Tiergarten. So checkered flag's been out. Oh, and it might be getting a bit tight between a GT3 BMW and one of the 3 Series cars from further back. That's actually theoretically a slower car trying to get ahead of the one that is reliant on all the aero, Peter.
Yeah, I think it was one of the M6s, wasn't it? With all the Schnitzer cars, I think, just coming back to the pits, finishing his lap, as it were, and minding his own business. We've said this so many times this weekend, but the other way round, where the GT3 SP9 category cars come across the lower category, the GT Cup cars and M240i's, and have to deal with them. Well, it was completely swapped around there. The 3 Series BMW trying to finish his lap and get his data and get his stuff for all his team, and there's a big M6 in the way.
The big difference there is the little BMW is desperate for a qualifying time, whereas the one in front doesn't really care because they do their qualifying later today. So there's your complete extremes as to the importance of this session. So the rain has definitely ceased. There's a more than a car width dry line now at the Dunlop hairpin, with the scoring tower on the inside of that corner. Although there doesn't seem to be a great deal of life in that scoring tower. There are spectators on site that would, I'm sure, love to know what the top 10 are, and that's because within a week of this weekend taking place, an announcement on the N24 website and at the track as well to say that there would be a small crowd permitted, carefully regulated, and also at a suitable social distance in the grandstands on the Grand Prix Strecke. Sadly, the campsites remain quiet there this weekend, and the whole of the Nordschleife is closed off to the public. So after 3 sessions of differing durations, a 90-minute session, 3 hours last night for night qualifying, and an hour today, it is the number 21 Conrad Motorsport Lamborghini Huracan, which is quickest, courtesy of a Marco Mappelli time, joined by Michele Di Martino, Franck Pereira and Axel Jeffries. And Franz Conrad will be eager to write some headlines about that, because they're not going to start on pole position. They may do, we don't know that yet, but they have topped regular qualifying.
Well, he's written a few headlines in his time, hasn't he? As a racer, former winner of this, as we said, this event, some 27 years, 1993, I think it was. He won it. But yeah, you know, he's not shy of a headline, is he, Franz Conrad, to say the least? We saw him in the pitch yesterday, overseeing this team, but his car, it is that remains at the top. Obviously, it was going to today, as Paul said, some 1 minute 20 difference in lap time, which is normally about a lap time we talk of anyway. We're adding 1 minute 20 because of the rain here at the Nordschleife, so we go from 8:11s to 1 minute 30s.
Yeah.
All to play for later on today now, though, Johnny.
Yes, it is. Certainly that's the case. I feel like we should actually go down the timing screen to tell you who has bagged pole position in their various classes, because that does seal everything outside of the SP9 division, and also lumping in, of course, the Glickenhaus, which runs in SPX, and the SP Pro Porsche, the number 35, which is the car that has been introduced by Porsche for 2020 to sort of sit between a Carrera Cup spec Porsche and the full house GT3R. So I'll discount SP9 runners that take us all the way down to 26th position overall, but congratulations to Klickversicherung.de, their team Porsche 911 GT3 Cup MR. Number 69 will start on pole position in the SP7 class, which is exclusively, of course, for Porsche Cup cars. SP8T taken by the Valkenhorst Motorsport BMW M4 GT4. That's the number 73 car, but not too far away in terms of times is the sister machine, the other BMW, number 73 and 74, therefore, on the front row in SP8T. Theoretically for GT4 cars, rather, but some tweak to those cars mean they cannot run in SP10, which is the homologated version for GT4. Whether they've done a tweak to the ECU or maybe some suspension changes as well, they run in SP8T instead. Cup X, the two KTM crossbows qualifying very close to one another. Treble One will start ahead of the 110 car in that class. The TCR pole position taken by Harry Propchek's team in the Hyundai Motorsport NI30. That's car 830 that will start from the front of the grid. I don't think we ever saw the Ford Mustang, which we reckon blew its engine yesterday and therefore wasn't able to qualify well in the AT class. It'll be a pole position for the 4Motors Bio Concept car. They've got a Cayman and a 911 GT3, and it is the GT3 Cup car that's taken pole position there, number 320. Cup 3, this promises to be a very closely fought division for all Caymans, and car 301 takes pole position in that. SP10 is a car that didn't appear in that session, which is the Michael Schrey Hoffer Racing by Bonk Motorsport BMW M4 GT4. Slightly concerned that the 70 car didn't feature at all in that session, but has already bagged a time to put it at the front of the grid. Who else do we need to talk about? SP4T is a pole position for the number 86 Porsche Cayman. In Class 5, which is the M240i Racing Cup division, it's the Pixum Team Adrenaline entered number 240 that takes pole position in that. There are a couple of BMW M2 Club Sports entered, and 36 is faster than the 39. And in V2T, congratulations to Danny Brink for setting a time in the Pixum Team Adrenaline 330i, car number 330, taking pole position in there. I have missed a few, but you can obviously head to the website 24h-renan.de for the full grid, which includes 90 plus cars. And during our full countdown to green tomorrow ahead of the race, I'll try and give everybody a mention that have scored a pole position, because everybody I think is worthy of note, and 24 hours provides us an opportunity to at least recognise everybody in the race, I should think, Peter.
Quite right. It's easy to focus on the cars right at the front. So, you know, the GT3s, as we say, but there's, as you said quite rightly yesterday, almost at the very beginning of the show, there's not 2 or 3 or 4 classes. There's 23 classes in this. So there's a lot to look forward to. We're back in 3 hours' time, aren't we, for qualifying?
Yeah, 5:50 Central European Summertime, 4:50 in the UK. Actually, we'll be on air a little bit 10 minutes before that for the full build-up for a changed for 2020 top qualifying across 2 different sessions. We'll explain the ins and the outs of that when we get closer to the time. Thanks to Paul Trustwell, to Peter Snowden, and to Kerry Cobb, who's been making sure we stay on air. Join us later on RS1 for the full top 30, top 31 qualifying. Bye for now.